she's really lonely and out walking the cornfield again.
Do you think they will ever find us true love?
Not hanging out with us all day.
We used to be lonely.
Until we met on Farmers Only.
FarmersOnly.com is the new online dating site for farmers, ranchers, and good old country folks.
You don't have to be lonely at FarmersOnly.com.
City folks just don't get it.
Oh, no, we don't. We sure don't. So, why did I play such a catchy little number? Well, it's a good way to lead into our discussion of exchange and rational choice theories. That'll become evident as we go through this in a bit. We're going to turn to the lower left quadrant. It's really the first time we've explicitly addressed the rational individual quadrant of social behavior. Theories that correspond to behaviorism in psychology and microeconomics in classical economics. The first of these theorists is Humans, who states that psychology is the determinant force. Social structures may act on individuals, but they do so based on stimuli, rewards, and punishments. So social structure, institutions, and large-scale cultural elements are basically the sum total of people working as individuals and with individual motivations. We act to maximize rewards and benefits. We act to minimize costs and punishments. Humans had another interesting concept, what he termed distributive justice. Now, we've been talking about justice in broad terms as a way to equalize the allocation of resources in a fair, that means equality of opportunity, manner across and between large segments of the population. When Humans talks about distributive justice, he means that in any social group, the rewards and costs should be evenly distributed across different levels of power. In other words, the costs and benefits that accrue to me, your professor, in doing work or falling behind, although qualitatively different than yours as a student, should nevertheless be relatively equal in terms of the costs and benefits that you receive for doing the work versus not. Blau expands on Humans' work. For Blau, it is not all psychological. Remember Simmel's work. Simmel was, as was George Herbert Mead, interested in relations, and that is Blau's unit of analysis. People as individuals are rational actors. They jointly pursue their interests as individuals. It is the interest of the individual, according to Blau, to get as much from the exchange as possible, with as little investment as possible. Exchanges for Blau are categorized in two ways. First, cost-benefit analysis. How much does it cost you, and how much benefit do you gain from the exchange? How much does it cost the other actor, and how much do they benefit from the exchange? Exchanges for Blau are essentially exercises in micropower. Who has the most power in exchange? Blau terms this social attraction, and it's a starting off point for any exchange. It's contingent on whether or not an individual expects to receive rewards for forming an association. It's true in any exchange, certainly in work exchanges, if I'm entering into a contractual relationship with another individual. But, and this is why I started off with our FarmersOnly.com example, it's true in any exchange. It's not merely of one type. Blau expands on Humans' work by talking about two types of relations, and in terms of their outcomes, relations that are based on extrinsic rewards and relations that are based on intrinsic rewards. Relations based on extrinsic rewards are detachable from the association in which they transpire. This is roughly equivalent to the secondary group, perhaps you remember from an introductory class that you had. Extrinsic rewards are gains or benefits that accrue outside of the exchange itself. Think contractual relationships, or the student-professor relationship, or a relationship you might have if you wanted to go get a good deal on a car. associating with others in this type of relationship serves as a means to an end. A successful sale, a good grade in class after entering into a relationship with the students and the professor, a promotion at work, a good deal. Intrinsic rewards, on the other hand, are based on the consequences of associations that we find pleasurable in and of themselves. Now, the most logical culmination of this type of relation would be that which is a result of courtship, dating, or marriage, although it can include any friendship or non-intimate in that kind of specific way relationship. We like to think of the way in which humans love, and ultimately courtship is where this theory hits home the hardest. We like to think of the way in which humans love and attach affection to other partners as sacred, inviolable, something really special. And of course it is. But Blau breaks it down. It's perhaps a stark reality that in dyadic, that means two people relationships, one person is more in love than the other. This has a potential for creating an imbalance in the relationship. If you remember this atrocious book and program a few years ago, The Rules, about women playing hard to get and throwing up all these barriers in order to test men, win their affections, you get a sense of this. Well, not so blatant. Most relationships involve some sort of rational assessment. You certainly wouldn't fall in love with and ignore the fact that someone was, I don't know, a serial murderer, for example. Think about this. We have all sorts of other examples from popular culture where this doesn't go right. And those are usually really excellent ways of looking at the veracity of a theory. You may or may not remember the show Catfish that was on the remnant of MTV, where people were duped into online interactions based on untruths told by potential partners, and how these were relentlessly brought to the fore. Indeed, online dating, a form of what anthropologists would call courtship, allows for a lot of this assessment to happen up front. And it calls into stark contrast the rules of exchange theory. This is where the limits of exchange theory, in my opinion, stop, though. My own research on online courtship behavior found that there is a serious disconnect for some people. About 3 out of 5 in a convenience sample I did for those of you who are method students. And what they were led to believe by what I call the online dating industry websites, the most prominent of them being eHarmony and Match.com, and their experience. My convenience sample had about 80 respondents, and we asked respondents about experiences, good or bad, that they encountered in their online dating. I had this exchange theory model squarely in mind when I began my research. What emerged, though, was salient about this work was that these experiences all took place within the context of one of the leading dating websites, which are multi-billion-dollar industries. That's a fact that seriously brackets a view of the world that is based exclusively on exchanges and individual cost-benefit analyses. In fact, it presides over a sense of false exchange when there otherwise might not be the possibility of an exchange. The success as financial entities of these websites, which are publicly traded, and their investment portfolios indicate that they are a smashing success in terms of getting people to invest in them because they're such great money makers, or they used to be. In fact, they measure their success by the number of people who resubscribe to these websites. And that's about 3 out of 5 people roughly resubscribe. They have a huge resubscription rate. In other words, people reboot their subscription, hope springs eternal. In fact, the claims that they make don't hold up to scrutiny very well. So what does this indicate? This indicates that there is a social structure at work that we must take into consideration when bracketing the sort of exchanges that we do as human beings. Into this theoretical gap comes the last of our theorists, James Coleman. Coleman falls squarely into the rational camp, individual camp. Actors have, according to him, the sole orientation of acting to maximize their realization of interests. Coleman expands Blau's concept of dyadic two-person groups into networks. Coleman's rational choice theory differentiates from exchange theory in that while individuals act to maximize a reward and minimize negative consequence, and Coleman recognized this, they do so within the context of group dynamics. Coleman brings trust into the equation. If the chance of winning relative to the chance of losing in an exchange relative to the cost, then trust is extended. This is predicated on Coleman's definition of norms, the socially defined informal rights that a person has in terms of controlling the actions of others. In a hierarchical work setting, for example, aren't they all? It is normative for a superordinate to have the say in dictating the terms under which a subordinate performs work. A person with this power, and it emerges into a larger group of people, can impose rewards for compliance to norms, or sanctions, or punishment for eschewing or ignoring the norms. And this extends from a person with having power to a group which has power. These relationships are, for Coleman, how social structure is built, and he is one of the first social network theorists. Social networks are effectively chains of connected relationships between a series of actors who know one another and to some greater or lesser degree can vouch for one another. They are open social networks where the boundary of the network is permeable or open to the world and outside influence, and there are closed social networks or closed series of interactions. Now, membership in these closed networks affords the incumbent with the potential for rewards. It is who, not what, you know, that old cliche, but it is absolutely correct. This knowledge based on network affiliations is termed social capital. And Coleman actually was able to argue convincingly for the integration of public schools in his research on social networks and high school achievement. This knowledge of helpful others is termed social capital. It might be how you find your next job, or your next big business deal, or get into graduate school, or get a job as a professor after graduate school, or get access to actual money, the ultimate form of capital, after all, either directly or indirectly. In fact, Coleman's conception of social capital and networks is front and center today in modern sociology. 5 decades before the internet and 6 decades before Facebook, Coleman's theoretical conceptualization of social networks is right on target, whether electronically mediated or not. Thank you.